Håfa and good morning, Senators. Welcome to today's Committee on the Whole proceedings. When we did recess last evening or early this morning, we had Senator Rodriguez who had the floor and he was about ready to proffer an amendment. Also, we had representatives of DOA. We will give our colleague and a few other of our colleagues another 5 minutes to be able to join us, and then we will proceed with the discussion on Senator Rodriguez's amendment. Any questions or comments? If not, recess. Buenas and Hafade. Talo Senador Magagiginig Liheslaturan. I want to recognize the representatives, Mr. Burns and Mr. Ariola. Thank you very much again for joining us this morning. Just to recall, a recap as we departed early this morning in regards to the committee in the whole. Senator Rodriguez had the floor. He was about ready to proffer an amendment, and also questions were previously posed to Mr. Burns as well as Mr. Ariola, who are representatives of the administration with the Department of Administration. Rules of engagement, senators, is each senator will be given an opportunity to be able to either ask questions or provide comments with a timeline of 10 minutes per senator. If, in fact, we've exhausted senators' comments, if you propose an amendment, then obviously discussion on the amendment restarts the clock. But upon the conclusion of your timeline, I request that all of the senators yield to other senators to be able to also participate in the conversation. And if other senators do not have any other questions or comments, then I will recognize you as a follow-on. Okay? Those are the rules of engagement. Any questions or comments, senators? Senator San Augustine, you have your hands raised?
Yes, Mr. Chair, is there any way we can get BBMR in here and DRT also, so when anything is discussed, we can ask those folks the questions that may be pertinent to their area?
There's been a request by Senator San Augustine to also invite representatives of BBMR and Revenue and Taxation. Any objections or any comments on that particular request? If not, we will take a 5-minute recess and invite those individuals. Sergeant at Arms, please. Good morning again, Senators. The Committee of the Whole is now back in session. We now have Mr. Carlson as well as Mr. Camacho joining us from BBMR and Rev. Tax. Senator Rodriguez had the floor, and I understand that he was prepared to proffer an amendment, but you do have the floor. Senator Rodriguez, you're recognized.
Håfa, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for being here today for BBMR and DOA. Mr. Chairman, I believe yesterday I did move the amendment forward. Everyone should have a copy of the amendment. Just to reiterate what this is. This is an amendment to substitute. Are we on Bill 1.6S? And any effort in this bill to raise the BPT from 4% to 6%, I am offering to replace that with this amendment, Mr. Chair. This amendment, again, is provisions from a bill that was introduced by the governor, which had a public hearing, Bill 230. Two of the provisions of that bill that I'd like to add on this amendment is the way banks are taxed, the formula that is used to come up with their BPT calculation. That's one of the amendments. Also, the amendment to statutorily end the qualifying certificate for insurance for the insurance industry is part of this amendment. And then finally, a health insurance premium that would be assessed on all health insurance fees. And so with this amendment, Mr. Chair, there is that possibility of netting about at least $20 million. And in an effort to avert further reduction in critical services by the executive branch in light of the financial crisis we're facing, I'm offering for us to entertain this motion in light of that. So I ask the body for their support.
Thank you very much, Senator Rodriguez. Considering that, in fact, it's a different piece of legislation that we have before us, and also the senator has proffered this amendment, the chair reserves the right to make any reference to it being materially relevant. So we are going to proceed with the discussion of this particular amendment. Senator Rodriguez, any further comments you would like to provide before we open the floor to other members? Any further comments? Okay. Senators, any questions, comments, or concerns with regards to the proposed amendment? Vice Speaker Talahi, any other members like to comment on the proposed amendment? If not, okay, Senator Sanagsin after Vice Speaker Talahi. Vice
Thank you,
Speaker
Mr.
Talahi,
Chair. First, a couple just technical questions. So does the sponsor intend to substitute all the pages of this floor amendment with the entire bill, all the sections of the bill? Or would there be any remaining sections in Bill 245, the original 245?
Vice Speaker Talahi, are you asking the sponsor of
I'm
the
just
amendment?
clarifying the amendment.
To respond? Okay.
If he would yield, yes.
Senator Rodriguez?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the intent is to replace the provisions in Bill 16-S with any mentions of a GRT increase. We're replacing it with this revenue stream from the proceeds of the taxation on banks and the assessment of a health insurance premium fee.
Thank you very much, Senator Rodriguez. Vice Speaker Talahi, does that answer your question?
I think, I guess if I could just ask one more time, are we including does that mean also section 3, 4, and 6, or just sections 1 and 2?
Thank you
Senator
very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm just by reviewing this, it'll be replacing Bill sections 1, 2, and 3. And I'd also like to ask legal counsel for legal counsel's assistance in anything else to comply with the motion, which is to replace any intent, any effort to raise the BPT with this amendment that I have before us.
Thank you.
Vice Speaker Talahi,
Yes.
the proposed amendment, senators, is to replace with Senator Rodriguez's amendment to replace sections 1, 2, and 3. And Senator Rodriguez has also presented some additional requests that legal counsel, if in fact subsequent sections make reference to BPTs, that the subsequent sections be reflective of the proposal that is before us. Senator Rodriguez, is that correct? Okay. So on that note, folks, we're going to take a 5-minute recess until legal counsel Jones says. Committee of the Whole is now back in session. The committee is entertaining Senator Rodriguez's amendment, which would replace sections 1, 2, and 3 with a caveat that the legal counsel, if should there be any subsequent reference to GRTs in the additional sections, that legal counsel make the appropriate correction. Any further discussion on the proposed amendment by Senator Rodriguez? Senator Eugene Bisco Lee, you're recognized, and then Vice Speaker, you still have the floor? Okay, I'm sorry, Senator Lee. I'll come to you right after. Senator Talai, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify, if one of these sections in this bill, it's my understanding that is covered by an executive order. In other words, an executive order currently states that any QCs up for renewal are not to be renewed, and I'm just wondering which section here and what is the effect of passing it statutorily versus allowing the executive order to be carried out.
Thank you, Vice Speaker Talai. Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. If I understand it correctly, the question is the difference between the moratorium the governor has placed on qualifying certificates versus what this amendment is trying to do. If that's the question, if we pass this statutorily, I believe it has a stronger force than what an executive order may do, as that may be rescinded at any time by the chief executive.
Which section does that relate to? Is that section 8?
Yes, that relates to the strike-throughs on the amendment. Strike-throughs on the eligibility of insurance as a industry that is allowed on our QC statute.
Which page, Senator?
Page 3 of the amendment starts with page 3 of the amendment.
All right.
Actually, page 2, and it goes on to page 3.
Okay. And if I may again ask the sponsor to yield,
Please continue.
Will these changes affect all insurance companies with QCs equally?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
But does it take effect when their QCs are up for renewal, or is it going to take effect to all of them immediately? Because it's my understanding only one is up for renewal. So that one will be prohibited if we pass this from going forward, right, with a QC, but the others will continue to operate with a QC exemption. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. These QCs are they're contractual agreements with the companies, and so even if we pass this, these will not revoke those contracts. This would it will be something prospectively.
Do you think? Well, I guess I'm just concerned that that leaves the insurance companies with a different competitive edge. But anyways, what about, do you, if I may point to page 6 of the bill, it's called a health insurance fee. And I'm wondering if this 4% fee will be applied to all insurance companies, whether they are receiving a QC, and even those insurance companies who, after this bill is passed, will not be receiving a QC. So would that result in some companies getting an 8% tax plus fee, and some companies just getting a 4% fee, those who have a QC? Is that correct?
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, this would be for health insurance premiums. And the Vice Speaker is correct that for those that may, whose QCs may end, and this may still be in effect, that it would be a double taxation on them, or double 4%. And so you know, this was really meant to be a kind of a bridge until such time, you know, we're able to come up with a permanent resolution to our situation here. As you know, Bill 230 was really meant for dedicated financing for GMH. However, because of this and the bigger picture of our financial situation, that I'm offering this as a bridge until such time we're able to come up with a long-term solution to this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think my final question is just, do we have any assurance that the insurance companies will not pass this 4% on to the consumers, to the people who really need health insurance?
Mr. Chair, there's no assurances. Just like if we were to raise the BPT, we wouldn't have any assurances if the price of milk, the price of bread, or anything would not increase. However, with this, all we can do is plead with the industry. The industry has received significant tax holidays for the past 20 years, and so we're pleading with them to be partners with us in this effort. This is an industry who also enjoys not just BPT exemptions, but also has income tax, corporate dividends as abatements from this QC. So I'm pleading with them that no increase is made because of this. However, you know, that's the most we can do from here.
Thank you very much, Senator Rodriguez. Thank you very much, Vice Speaker Talahi. Senators, just please be very mindful that there are also subsequent sections within the proposed amendment that are not enumerated. Like, for example, on page 5, after page 4, section 8, page 5, there's an additional section, effective date of changes to insurance QC. So that would be, my understanding is that would be added at the end of the bill that we are presently discussing, bill number 16-S. Is that the intent, Senator Rodriguez, or did you want them to be subsequently numbered?
Mr. Chair, I will leave that to legal counsel. As you know, we've took this provisions from Bill 230, and so I will leave that technical change to legal counsel.
Okay, Senators, so please be very mindful of that. Senator Regine Bisco-Lee, you have the floor.
Buenas, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a point of inquiry. A point of inquiry?
Please ask your point of inquiry.
Has the author received revised public comment from our local, the island's insurers, or from the Guam banking industry or the Guam Banking Association on the impact of this revised proposal on customers, on subscribers?
Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Rodriguez, would you like to provide a response to the inquiry?
Was that a point of?
That's a point of inquiry from the senator.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can she repeat that?
Senator Lee, if you can please restate your statement again.
Has the author received revised responses or revised public comments from island insurers and the Guam Banking Association with regard to this revised proposal and how that might affect consumers and subscribers?
Mr. Chair, I haven't received anything besides what was already provided to the committee during the public hearing.
Thank you, Senator Rodriguez. Senator Lee, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And maybe along the same vein, with this proposal, this amendment, would it limit opportunities for local families, entrepreneurs, and local businesses to access capital?
Senator Lee, are you presenting the question to the chair, or?
I'm sorry, if the author of the amendment could respond, if it would limit.
Senator Rodriguez, would you
opportunity
like to respond to the question?
To be honest, I don't know. Can't answer her question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator San Agustin and then Senator Tom Adda. Senator San Agustin, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question that I'm not too sure if the sponsor, the author of the amendment, can answer this, but maybe Revenue and Tax can. When we stop the QCs, what is currently the estimated revenue we would get when there's no QC? Do you have that information? Because I know they don't file anything, so, because of the QC. Can either
Senator
one?
San Augustine, are you presenting that to any members of the panel?
Yes, or the author.
Okay.
Either one.
Are there any members of the panel that can respond to the good senator's question? If you can restate your question again, Senator San Augustine.
Number one, the QC gives an exemption for 3 areas, correct? There's the BBT, property tax, and I think income tax. Am I correct, Mr. Camacho?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what the government will get in revenue when the QC is eliminated from those insurances?
I believe there's a report that depending on the businesses, I think it can range from $8 to $10 million annually for the BPT.
Okay. Total of all the insurance that are on QC, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So you're saying that if it's $8 to $10 million, we're only looking at about $500 to $750,000 a month, correct? There's 12 months in a year. You just divide it by 12, okay? And I'm just trying to make sure that the author that proffered the amendment, we know exactly what we could anticipate. How many insurance have a QC that is up for renewal? Do you know? So we know what the estimate would be.
I'm not too sure, but I think Gita mentioned it last. There's at least a couple. I think 1 or 2. I'm just from listening from the conversation on the renewal for BPT. So I don't know. No.
The reason why I'm asking that question is because when the governor's executive order stops the renewal of QCs, that's one. When is that date? We need to look at that date so we know when we're going to get that $500,000 or $1 million a month, okay? When we know all that information, then we know how to measure what the government is going to receive. And at the same time, I'm almost sure the insurance people, when they don't have the QC, they will increase the rates. Unless they have a great heart to open up and say, we're willing to give up 20% or 30% of their profit, which I haven't heard of any business doing that.
Thank you very much, Senator San Augustine. Senator Tamara, and then Senator Muñoz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the question was asked earlier as to what impact would the deletion of the qualifying certificate for insurance companies have on ultimately on the premiums that are charged to the customers. And of course the response, if I understood, if I heard correctly, was that there's really no assurance that this new additional cost component for insurance companies would not be passed on. I guess in my mind, I think it's inevitable that the insurance companies will pass on this additional cost to the individuals to the subscribers, to the insurance subscribers. And the concern that I would have then is that we would then be directly impacting the ability of the community to be able to obtain health insurance to meet their needs. I think that the removal of, I certainly could support the removal of qualifying certificates, but I think that would be appropriate when we transition, if and when we transition from a business privilege tax to a sales tax, so that then the individual who wants to subscribe to a no deductible insurance, obviously his premium is going to be higher, and so the tax on that particular subscription will be much greater. But for the individual who can really afford, the bare minimum just to cover for the catastrophic needs, then the added tax that goes with that would be certainly a lot lower. So I could support the removal of a QC under a sales tax regime, but certainly not under a business privilege tax. And so because of that, I would have to object to this particular amendment. The other concern that I have on the banking side is that we already know that there's an uneven playing field out there between the banks and your, what do they call the other guys? The credit unions. And so there's that uneven playing field. And now if we're going to add on this tax component to the banks, obviously that's going to translate into their ability to provide competitive interest rates on savings, and probably the cost of, they'll probably recover that through the interest rates on loans. And so it just puts them on it just makes that playing field even all the more uneven. And so that too, I do have concerns. And so I would have to object to this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Ada. Senator Muñoz and then Senator Torres.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions for the author. Like the retiring speaker, I had a concern about the insurance where in page number 3, eliminating the insurance, exempting them from the qualifying certificate. And then on page number 6, including the health insurance premium fee, I was just wondering if the author had intended to make that a total of 8%, 4% on the insurance companies, and then adding on the premium fee. So that was one of my concerns about the insurance, if the intention was to tax them on eliminating the exemption and then adding on the premium fee. That was my first question.
Thank you very much, Senator Muñoz. Senator Rodriguez, would you like to respond to the question?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Senator. The establishment of the premium fee is being made because as we got information from GIDA, all the companies still have QCs that are in existence, that are valid QCs, and so they already have an abatement on their GRT, and so this kind of tries to catch at least the 4% revenue with this health insurance premium fee.
Thank you, Senator Rodriguez. Senator Muñoz, does that answer your question?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Senator Muñoz. Senator Torres?
I have one more question.
I'm sorry. You may proceed.
So on page 1, on the tax for the banks, I noticed that you eliminate all of the deductions except for letter B, interest and discount paid. I was just wondering what the net effect would be by eliminating all those other deductions except for the interest or discount it paid. I mean, will it double or triple their BPT contribution because you eliminated all those other deductions?
Senator Rodriguez, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, if you recall, Bill 230, introduced by the governor, that version of the bill amended the statute to tax our banking industry on gross proceeds. What this does is take into consideration the input from the banking industry. They've made a very good argument in terms of providing that this is the way banks are taxed. They're taxed on their net income, and net income, most especially on interest and discounts paid. During the whole discussions, we never heard anything about the deductions that they've been given on deducting their personnel, marketing, all other expenses that any other business or industry are not allowed to deduct in the formulation of their BPT obligation. And so with that, that's what this amendment does, is take into account and of course letting them know we've heard them loud and clear. And so that's what this amendment does, is listen to what input they provided us.
Thank you, Senator Rodriguez. Senator Muñoz, you still have the floor.
I have no further questions.
Thank you, Senator Muñoz. Senator Torres, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to raise 2 points of concern that this amendment raises. One is that it's a very far departure from the intent of Bill 16-S, number one, insofar as 16-S has to do with the raising of the BPT. Secondly, I take great concern with the section on the effective date of changes to the insurance QC and the contractual compliance with existing QCs in force and effect. I do recall at another public hearing on, I believe, Bill 230, the representative of GIDA discussed, and I believe it was that, and I stand corrected if I'm misplaced, but I do recall that there was mention of several QCs, or one QC that was under negotiation presently for insurance companies, and I believe 2 that were coming up for renewal or reconsideration in the very near future. But what I'm especially concerned with in the language of this is that the effective date of this act would take upon the rightful termination of the QC issued that on the date of the passage of this act expires last among all of such certificates. What this suggests to me is that with the governor's moratorium on any renewals, you have a situation where one, if not more than one, insurance companies will have the benefit of a QC, while others do not have the benefit. We don't understand right now how many have QCs that have yet to expire, nor do we understand the duration of the terms of those QCs. And so there's just so much out there that's uncertain and not provided to us that suggests that this is really a dangerous proposition. Very dangerous proposition in terms of a level playing field and an extreme unfair advantage to that insurance company that has the benefit and luxury of writing out the contractual terms of their QC, especially when we are we're coming up to bids for insurance coverage for fiscal year 2019 and the like. And what we don't want to do is create special legislation in the form of this act, and we also don't want to create an extreme disparity amongst ratepayers, and ratepayers particularly of this magnitude. And insofar as the banking institution, we also heard testimony about what effect this would have on those other institutions that wouldn't fall under this statute or this new act. The difference between a banking institution and a credit union, for example. So I think that we cannot be so hasty as to want to see a revenue stream of this form without understanding the corresponding effect and hardship and detriment that it will have to some other insurance companies or banking institutions. But primarily, the concern here is how the act takes effect, how some will write out their contract, how others are held. I want to just refrain from saying more. But I do think that it is a very dangerous proposition at the very least. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Torres. And with regards to your initial concern, I recognize your initial concern, but the chair has proceeded with the discussion on this amendment. Senator St. Nicholas, you're recognized. On the amendment, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to first re-inquire with the author. The amount that this amendment is intended to raise is how much?
Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you. As the Director of Revenue Taxes stated, about between 8 to 10 million.
8 to $10 million? Was this amount prior to the changes under the definition of net income, or is this inclusive of those changes?
Okay, I was talking about the insurance. And so are you asking about the banking?
I'm talking about aggregate, yeah, total bill. The total about the amount that's supposed to be brought in.
Senator Rodriguez.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear him. Can you repeat that?
The total bill, the total aggregate amount that's anticipated to be brought in, inclusive of the banks.
As I stated earlier in the opening, it's at least $20 million that we're anticipating.
So we're expecting 8 to 10 million on insurance, as you stated earlier, and roughly 10 to 12 million on the banking side?
That's correct.
And I just wanted to clarify with this amendment here on the definition of net income. So by leaving in section B, is that what we're going to be taxing, or is that what we're not going to be taxing with this act?
The calculation on how they are taxed now is that it is based on their net income. And how to get to their net income, they're allowed to deduct from item A all the way to item I. And so what this amendment does is that it now allows them to only deduct the interest or discounts paid, and from there, now from that amount, that's how the calculation would be to come up with their GRT obligation. And
you're confident that allowing for that to be discounted is still going to bring in 10 to 12 million dollars in gross revenue, or in revenue, additional revenue?
Based on discussions with the Banking and Insurance Commission, that's what we're estimating. And if the director has any other information, then we'll welcome that as well, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Director, Relevant Tax. Mr. Camacho, do you have any additional comments to add to the senator's question?
Basically, you know, on the taxing of the banks, I know the senator mentioned 10 to 12 million dollars. So I'm not really too sure, but when we ran the numbers, we weren't getting that, you know, that much. I mean, we were looking at, you know, around $6 million. But if you were allowed to deduct the interest of discount paid, it's going to even go lower. That's something that I know you probably work with R.D. Láhen on these things, but that's the numbers that we got.
Or if maybe, Mr. Camacho, what is the taxes being paid now by the banking institutions? Not individually, a cumulative amount. What is the BPT that's being paid on the existing, how the statute is right now?
Well, the statute for banking and financial institution, currently they file an annual return. They're allowed within 90 days after the close of the taxable year to report their gross income and all the deductions that are listed here from A to I. And when we were running the numbers, they were at least paying at least $5 to $6 million. Yes, I think based on 2015 though.
So that's the amount that they're paying now based on the net income as defined. So
yes, because if you were to take out all the deduction, then you arrive at gross income. So you take that gross income times 4%. So that's basically what they're paying.
The $6 million now.
Yeah.
That's different from the information we received from.
Yeah, I know you probably were working with Art, but this is the information that we got on the return.
And so that's new information from what we received from when Mr. Láhen was there?
I don't know what Mr. Láhen gave you, but when we ran the numbers of all the banking institutions, I think there was about 14 of them, and this is what we got.
Thank you, Mr. Camacho. Thank you, Senator Rodriguez. Senator Nicholas, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to clarify, Mr. Camacho, prior to this passing, right now we are bringing in only $6 million from the banks currently.
That is correct.
So if we were to pass this, how much more would we bring in? Because that's the whole intent of...
I have to go back because now this one is basically allowing interest and discount paid. So
To be deducted.
to be deducted. So I need to go back to that formula because we look at all the gross incomes that are reported,
Right.
less all the deductions. If we were to take all the deductions out, we're going to arrive at $6 million is
Right.
being paid. This is just an estimate based on our gathering of information.
I understand.
So we have to go back now and look at what deductions are being taken on the interest or discount paid, and then we do, that will be actually, will reduce the gross income to arrive at the
taxable
projected.
amount.
Yes.
That's right. So what was the amount before this change was proposed? If they had taken out interest and discount paid as a deduction, what was the full amount going to be?
Like I said earlier, banks report their gross income
Right.
and their deductions.
Right.
So the taxing of banks basically is right now, like I said earlier, is based on net income.
Right.
So if you take the gross income and you eliminate all the deductions, then you're going to arrive at gross income times
Right.
4%. So that's basically, in other words, what we're saying is that if you were to take all this deduction out, this is what the banks are going to be paying.
So what was that amount? What was the gross income amount?
I don't know, but it should come out with $6 million.
No, right now it's $6 million after these existing deductions. With this amendment, when we take out all of these deductions, it should have been a much higher amount, and then with the adding back of the interest or discount paid, it should become a different amount. And so I'm trying to at least know what the original range was before, and then I wanted to discuss what the new range could potentially be.
I need to go back and look at the numbers.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that's very important, because if we're going to be entertaining this as a substitute, we need to fully understand how much money it's going to bring in if it's going to be considered as a viable alternative.
Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that if you take the total gross income reported,
I understand what you're saying,
and
sir,
then you
yes.
take out all the deductions,
It's $6 million.
yeah, $6 million.
Right.
Yes.
And so I'm just trying to find out, because if you can just tell me what the gross number is, I just got to multiply that by 4%, and I'll be able to know what the amount was.
Report with me, but I can certainly get it later
Okay.
on.
If we could have that, please, as soonest. And again, Mr. Chairman, that also takes me to my next point, and that is that by allowing for subsection 1B to be deducted, I think it's important for us to understand banking and how they make their money. Banks actually, they really categorize their income in two ways. One is either interest income and non-interest income. And the reason why it's that basic is because interest income makes up 90 to 95% of all their income. The only other income that they make outside of interest income is typically ATM fees or overdraft charges or safe deposit box rentals, but any other income outside of interest income, very, very minimal considering the big picture. And so if we're going to continue to allow interest or discount paid to be deducted from the gross income, it's going to drive the amount far, far down, much closer to the $6 million on the low end than whatever the gross amount is on the high end. And it's important for us to have that discussion as we consider the amendment, because if by adding this provision back in here, it's going to pretty much discount the banking income, then we need to have a very clear handle on what the new numbers would be with that change. And that was my first point of discussion. My second was, and first let me preface by saying I appreciate the efforts of the author to try and find alternatives. I think all of us in the room have the same mindset. We don't want to raise the cost of living on our people. We want to try and avoid that as much as possible. Unfortunately, banking and insurance is just so pervasive that even an increase on the taxes on these two industries, it pretty much spills into almost every industry. If you're a business that offers health insurance and your premiums go up, your employer contributions are going to go up, and so your prices are probably going to be impacted. The government of Guam, just recently we overrode a bill to go with the lowest cost option. If we increase the taxes on the premiums, that lowest cost option is going to go up by that much more. The same goes for banking. If we did tax the interest, that would spill over into a reduction in perhaps the interest that banks pay on savings accounts. And those kind of things have an adverse effect on some of our most vulnerable in the community, particularly our retirees who live on a fixed income. If we increase insurance premiums on retirees and they have a fixed income, they are disproportionately affected. If we create a policy that's going to result in lower interest being paid on savings accounts, a lot of our retirees live on the interest on their savings. So I share the sentiments of some of my other colleagues with respect to this amendment. I understand that it narrows the tax to a very limited number of industries, but those industries and the business that they do is just so pervasive that it would still have a similar effect to what would happen if we were to just remove the exemption of the BPT from wholesalers. I mean, that's just one industry, but again, it's just so pervasive that it's going to spill out into the greater community. And unfortunately, I think that the same effect will be rendered if we were to pass this amendment. That notwithstanding, I think that it's important for the body to still have all of the information available. So if Mr. Camacho can still provide us with at least what the gross amount was, so that we can have an idea of what that might be with interest or discount pay. Perhaps even the Insurance and Banking Commission can pull out what that particular deduction was and give us a harder number on what the amounts raised would be. But again, also notwithstanding that, Mr. Chairman, I also object to the amendment just because I think that its cause and effect will just be as pervasive as if we were to repeal the BPT on wholesalers or raise the BPT across the board. And that being said, Mr. Chairman, I would like us to be able to provide alternatives to the administration, but that also would require the administration afford us some opportunity to sit down and work with each other and with our offices. And if we're going to be constantly called into special sessions to entertain measures, it takes time away also from us being able to go back and do that as well. So I would like for us to be able to just come to the understanding and take some other options into consideration and be given the opportunity to work on that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Siniclas. Any other comments on the proposed amendment by Senator Rodriguez? Questions, comments, or concerns? Vice Speaker Talaya, you're recognized.
I was wondering if the Department of Revenue Tax could tell us if the companies affected by this bill, for example, health insurance companies who have QCs, who you said they are receiving abatements in BPT, property tax, and income tax. Is that correct?
I guess that's the normal. Normally, most of them will get the income tax and the property tax, and I think some of them get the shareholder, non-resident shareholder rebate. So depending on the rebate issued.
Are you able to tell us whether all these companies under the new tax reform passed by Congress would be the same companies that will be getting to keep their 40% of income tax?
I believe you're talking about the reduction from 35 to 21%.
Correct.
I think everybody, I believe all corporations would apply to that rate.
So is that the same then for the banks and banking institutions, small lenders and loan associations that would be affected by this bill?
If they're you're talking about the reduction on the
yes, does that
income
also
tax.
affect them?
I mean, if there are corporations, then they only follow one rate, which is the 21% rate.
And I was following very closely my colleagues' discussion regarding interest or discount paid. If this, I wasn't aware that this refers to interest income as opposed to interest paid by the business on its own business. But, and I'm curious now whether rents paid is the same thing. Does that mean paid to them or paid by them? And yeah, but I guess if you were going to give us additional information, that would become clear. So,
Information.
all right. But I do also want to commend the author of this amendment. I think it's a very good option when we are looking at affecting a limited number of people who, especially right now, are receiving tax breaks. I mean, this is what the public wants us to look at. Why are they receiving tax breaks while we are considering raising taxes on every single consumer with a gross receipts tax increase in every single transaction that they make, pretty much? And I would like to, just get a little bit more information from the Department of Revenue Tax as to some of the questions that have been raised. And but I do think we do have to look at all options, and these are very viable options. And the amount that would be brought in here is quite significant compared to some of the other options that are on the table. And my biggest concern, however, is kind of the implementation of it, that implementation where we might have QC. Can I ask, does anyone know how far is how late is the latest QC up for renewal? Because I know we have one that's up for renewal right now, and then there are some that will go on for a number of years, and I'm curious how many more years till the last one is up for renewal.
Does anyone on the panel have that information? Madam Vice Speaker, no one in the panel at this point in time has that information.
Thank you.
Did you want to?
Oh yes, I would like to ask that information, because I'm thinking it's quite clear that the lawyers have already submitted testimony who represent one of the insurance companies that they're going to challenge this as being an impairment of contracts, because their interpretation of our QC statute is that they are entitled to this QC forever, as long as they are in good standing. And I think this may be something that the government of Guam pursues, because we do need to know whether it's forever and our hands are really tied, or can we affect all of them. And I would like to affect all of them equally. I'm not inclined to go with an idea that's going to give one company, an 8% increase in tax versus the rest of the insurance companies 4%. I think the most supporting competition between the insurance companies is very critical for us at this point. So, thank you, and thank you to the sponsor for this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice Speaker. Any other questions, comments, or concerns with regards to the Rodriguez amendment? There's been an expression of objection. Senator Rodriguez, did you want to close out on the amendment?
Mr. Chair.
Stand by. Senator Espaldon, you're recognized on the amendment, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I should direct my question towards Reverend Tax, Mr. Camacho. Earlier in this term, I believe legislation was passed. It was legislation introduced by the mover of this amendment, and in essence, it was, I believe, the Healthcare Para Todo Act. Are you familiar with that one, Mr. Camacho?
A little bit. I think Art. This is something that Art worked on as the insurance commissioner.
Okay, but and perhaps the author can correct me if I'm mistaken, but in essence, I think that was a mandate that was passed and put into public law that mandates Reverend Tax to come up with the rules and procedures to implementing, I believe it's a fee of some kind of 4% upon health insurance companies, so that that money can be dedicated and go towards something to the effect of a universal insurance coverage that would basically help cover the indigent and those who cannot afford health care. And I think the mandate was more for revenue tax to come up with the rules and regs on that, and to focus in on that 4% fee that will be assessed against health insurance companies. And so I guess the question is that the first question is, do you know whether there's been any movement in the development of the rules and regulations of that mandate?
I'm not familiar with that. I heard about it, but maybe Senator Rodriguez can talk about it, I think.
Okay, and maybe the question
Senator
should be
Espadon,
posed
did
to
you want
the author.
Okay.
Sure.
Senator Rodriguez, please.
Just to enlighten us.
Okay. Thank you
Because,
very
and
much.
if I could just maybe, before he answers that, only because if that is still in the development process, and ultimately Rev and Tax does come up with the rules and regs that would assess a 4% upon the health insurance companies, then the concern would be that that goes into effect at 4%. We go in, and then if we pass this amendment, then there's another 4 to 6%. And again, just in totality, what are we really looking at in terms of the tax or the assessments that's going to be charged against the insurance companies?
Thank you, Senator Espadon. Senator Rodriguez, on the senator's inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much to Senator Espadon. It's a very good question. The bill that we passed, Bill 132, I don't know what the public law is now. Unfortunately, that provision that was part of that bill was not passed as at least I would have wanted it, where that bill was passed as a mandate. What had happened was that in working with the committee chair, Speaker B.J. Cruz, that Bill 132 became an exhibit into a mandate that directed Department of Public Health and Social Services to apply for a Section 1115 waiver with the federal government in an effort to expand our Medicaid program so that more of our people will be eligible for health insurance. That bill, Bill 132, which established the healthcare para todo, and the funding mechanism, part of the funding mechanism for that would have been an assessment of the 4%. However, that wasn't passed as a mandate. That was as a template, as a guide. When we go to the federal government and say, this is one of the components on how we're going to fund this. And so that is not in effect. And so this does not have any double implication if we pass this. So this would be the only 4% that is assessed on health insurance premiums.
Senator Espadon, you still have the floor.
And I appreciate that answer. However, I just need to at least inquire then that, and I thank the good author of that bill for that clarification, that this was really going after the federal funds to some degree, and I guess that fee was supposed to, the fees that were kind of attached to that bill were supposed to be the proposal in which we're going to be able to match or provide for some of the local funding on our side. I guess the follow-up question then becomes, if this amendment passes, does that render that Bill 132 impractical or impracticable?
Thank you, Senator Espadon. I take it you're posing your question to the sponsor of the
Yes, I am.
legislation. Senator Rodriguez.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, as I mentioned, that is one of the components of the funding, the proposed funding for that program. And that is not, we wouldn't know until, number one, the program that we're applying for the waiver from is approved. If that program is approved, then that comes back to us here. As I stated on the floor for that bill, because there was these concerns about, okay, we're going to implement a fee on the insurance companies, and the body at that time didn't want that to happen. And so as I mentioned on the floor, that we would have to come back to this body or future legislatures now to make a determination on where the additional funding would come from to match the federal dollars to make that program work.
Senator Espadon, you still have the floor.
I appreciate that. And I guess it does bring a little bit of concern. I mean, and I understand that it's not in effect yet, But in terms of the overall policy and what the attempt is to be able to access more federal dollars, right, then this amendment almost compounds the difficulty of really going after that concept of being able to help those who cannot afford health insurance. And again, I might be mistaken, but, and the good chairman is perhaps much more apprised and much more studied in this area, but from my vantage point, are we just creating another problem that will compound itself if and when we ever get to that point where the federal government does approve the program, you know, or if the program is approved by the federal government? And so I raise a little bit of concern with that. I know that there have been some concerns about this amendment. I too have some concerns, but I know there's no need to regurgitate what's been said earlier, Mr. Chair. But as a point of information, I'd like to also acknowledge that I believe that Mr. Flores, who had testified on Bill 230 from Bank Pacific, along with others within the financial sector who had testified, bottom line, had given their reasons of why adding the banks and banking institutions, you know, might not be such a good idea. And so as a point of information, if there is a need to call in Mr. Flores, he is, I believe, out in the lobby. That's all for now, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Espadon. Any further comment on the proposed amendment? If not, Senator Rodriguez, would you like to close on your amendment?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I want to thank my colleagues for their input and their feedback on this. And I really respect all the comments that were provided. However, we are in very unusual times. I mean, we are in a special session here today with trying to deal with an emergency and a crisis. And so this was really an honest attempt to provide an alternative to the option before us, which is to, across the board, to a greater number of our people, to impose a higher tax rate on BPT. And so I understand as well that for this industry, this would indeed be would have an impact on the two industries. And this attempt that I've been trying to move forward is in no way an attempt to kind of discredit the industry. For the insurance companies, they have a QC, which was obtained legally. This body, many years ago, authorized this industry to take advantage of this. At that point, health insurance companies were paying GRTs, and by an action of this body, the next day was allowed to abate their tax revenue. And that is really what started the erosion of our tax base. And here we are, Mr. Chair, talking about just on BPT alone, just a 4% on the over $250 million that this industry takes in health insurance premiums. And so this attempt is trying to right what I see was the wrong, which was done many years ago. This argument of this may now force the industry to raise premiums, I really don't buy that, Mr. Chair. What we're talking about here is just the 4% on GRT. Think about the income tax, the corporate income tax, the corporate dividends, the shareholder dividends, and I believe there's other taxes that are provided for them to be abated. And all we're saying here is we're in a critical time, we're in a crisis, for us all to be able to come together and be able to look at this as a way to deal with this crisis. 2011, Mr. Chair, the average premium for large employers was, the average premium for our people was $2,612. And that's with the QC, with a full 100% abatement on corporate income taxes, full abatement on 4% BPT. In 2012, with the same benefits of the tax holidays, the average premium for large employers was $2,734 for our people. 2014, Mr. Chair, with the same tax holidays that they received, $2,897 was the average premium. 2015, with the same tax holidays that were provided to the insurance industry, was $2,813. And the final year that we have data from the Banking and Insurance Commission is in year 2016, with the same tax holidays, the same 100% corporate abatements, corporate dividends, 4% GRT. The average premium was $3,034. And so with the tax holidays, our premiums have been going up. And the whole premise of the qualifying certificate, Mr. Chair, was to ensure that we held the line on premium. And that hasn't been the case for just at least this short period of years that the data that we have in front of us here. And so part of this amendment allows the insurance industry to offset this 4% against their medical loss ratio in terms of their administrative costs. And so we're even providing them that opportunity to be able to offset it against their administrative costs. Guam, unlike the states, the other states, have provision of what is known as Obamacare that has the medical loss ratio where a certain percentage of premiums received must be used for health insurance claims. The other percentage must be used for administrative costs and for profits. Here on Guam, we don't have that, except for the Government of Guam contract, which we do have a participating agreement. If we're very concerned about the increase in what this may do in increasing the health insurance premium of our people, we do have a bill that I've introduced last term and even in this term, which we did have a public hearing, that would establish our own local medical loss ratio law that would now cap what is spent on health insurance claims and what profits and administrative costs could be taken by these companies. And so I'm asking my colleagues to please reconsider and really just to bring it back down to where we're at. We're in a crisis situation. That's why we're here. We want to be able to avert any further drastic measures that the government is taking in critical areas such as the fire departments, with police precincts being shut down. And you know, I'm assuming if nothing else happens, nothing else moves forward, schools, teachers will be affected. And so as much as possible, Mr. Chair, this is an effort to avert that situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Rodriguez. There's been an expression of objection. Also, before I call for the vote, there have been a request for two separate information from representatives of the administration. One is the gross amount of the banking industry as reflective in the proposed amendment, the revenues, and the second is the timelines affiliated or associated with the insurance qualifying certificates and the ongoing renewal process. On the proposed amendment by Senator Rodriguez.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Yes, Senator
Excuse
Adam.
me, but you were just mentioning the two items of information that's being requested. Is that still going to be necessary even though we're going to vote? I mean, would that be moot?
No, because it was a requested information, and I believe it's information that would be relevant to members of this body. I regurgitated the request.
All right, thank you.
Mr.
Thank you,
Chair,
Senator Adam. Yes, Senator
I'm sorry, just to clarify on that point, I at least am under the impression that to be able to really vote on this measure, that information is necessary prior to the vote. Because if the revenues don't reach what is being projected by the mover of the amendment, or if it's way, bottom line, if it's way under, then perhaps, again, we can't really quantify what this really does. So I believe that information is really critical to the vote. And I'm not really sure we should vote in advance of that.
I will recognize your request. So is there a motion to recess until 2 p.m. this afternoon?
Well,
to allow the administration representatives to be able to get that information.
Is that a reasonable time frame? I think we need to ask the administration whether they can get us that information by 2.
Mr. Chair, as to the expiration dates for the QCs, Gita has sent information to my email, so I will provide copies of that to everyone.
Okay, and also Mr. Carlson was about ready to provide that information. Mr. Camacho, how much time do you need to be able to get the additional information requested? Okay, we'll take a 15-minute recess. I understand he may have the information readily available in his vehicle. Committee in the whole is now back in session. Senators, you've just received two separate documents. One is in draft form, and the top wording is Annual Gross Receipts Tax Return for Financial Institutions on Form BRFI, and it has the information requested by the body or members of the body. And then you also have a secondary sheet that was provided to each and every one of you by Mr. Rojas in response to directed to the Vice Speaker, which reflects the qualifying certificate beneficiaries as of December 2017. I would like to ask, rather, so that for the information of our people who are watching, if I can ask a representative on the panel if they can just highlight the numbers, and then we will proceed with voting on the amendment.
On the information on the impact on the banks and financial institutions, what basically we have in front of you is a compilation of 2014 and 2015 tax year. And what I asked my staff is they look at 14 different taxpayers, and then they compile the information based on what's reported on the return. So, for example, in 14, there's a reported 176,106,751 of gross income, and also for 15, almost the same amount, 178 million, I'm sorry, $693,171. So there's some notes in the bottom, because we're doing this real fast. We kind of like, if we didn't find the particular year, we look at the prior year to get the information to make it complete. So this is just a study of what would be the impact, basically, if we were to repeal all the deductions that are provided by law for banking institutions. And if you go down the line, it'll give you all the total that's reported by each 14 of the financial institutions. So if you go down, it gives you all the deductions. And if you want to really look at what this bill is trying to say, it's basically saying that the deductions that was reported for interest or discount paid for 14 is $10,782,474, and for 15 is $6,941,633. And then the impact will give you the impact will be the next column. For example, for 14 is 268, which is 4% of that is $268,593. And for 15 is $277,655. So when we compile all this information, you can see that, you know, the bottom line, if you were to take this 14 financial institution and allow report the gross income and allow all the deductions that they took, they come up with really a net income in 14 of $23,879,971, and on 15, $792,032. And if you were to take 4% of that, you can say that they're only putting in 14, $955,199, and for 15 is $1,230,681. So if you take that, what's been reported, and you take the deductions off the formula, then this is what the impact will give you, which means that in addition to the 1.2 million, for example, for 15, we'll be getting the 5.9 million as additional revenue. Likewise with 14, if you take the impact on all the deductions, we'll be getting $6 million, $89,071. And again, I put some notes in the bottom because if we didn't get all the numbers for each 14. We use the following year data as a replacement just to make it complete, in other words. Prior year, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Camacho. On that information that has been provided to the body, any questions or inquiries? Yes, Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Camacho, for this information. As I was talking to Mr. Camacho offline earlier, the numbers that we have before us and what was provided directly from the Banking and Insurance Commission, there's some discrepancies there, and he explained perhaps why there may be some of these discrepancies. And so, of course, the information that we received directly from the Banking and Insurance reflects a higher amount. And I know that he said he's going to go back and verify that. But the bottom line here, Mr. Chair, is that there would be a positive revenue if we were to move on this amendment, whether it be the 6.8 that Mr. Camacho had just mentioned, or 10 million that I referenced earlier based on the information that I have. There is a significant amount that could be realized, that could be added to the other component of this amendment that would bring in additional revenue that we don't have now, and to hopefully avert a further erosion of the cash shortfall that we anticipate for this year. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Rodriguez. On the other information requested by the body with regards to qualifying certificates, anyone in the panel would like to explain that, please?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everybody. If we could go to the first page, and I draw everybody's attention to the column marked industry. You go all the way down to the bottom and you'll see domestic insurance. The first one would be QC number 216, so that's the far left column that has the QC number. And then you move over to the beneficiary. It would be, initially it was Zurich Insurance Company, and then in 2008, a majority owner and name change, and now it's known as Island Home Insurance. You'll see the benefits that they get: corporate tax rebate, dividend tax rebate, and GRT abatement. And then the effective / expiration date for this first one is January 1st, 2018. It is one of the two that are currently under review for extension. And then on the next page, again, going down, the next one should be 217.
Mr. Chair, in reference to the information that Mr. Carlson is bringing up, can we get a dollar amount that if they don't get the QC, what revenue are we going to generate from removing the QC from these insurance? Because I haven't seen, I don't know if Revenue and Tax has that information, that what was abated or what was, what they got. What is that value? So that we'll know how much money, could come in.
Thank you very much, Senator Sanagsin. I'll have Mr. Carlson complete the presentation, and then you can pose that question, please.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so QC number 217, Pacific Indemnity, it has an expiration date of December 2nd, 2017. So those first two are the ones that are currently under review, as stated earlier. And then the other ones on the list, going down the list, again, for domestic insurers, is First Net, QC number 221. Pacific Home, QC number 222. Pacific Care Health, number 232. This one here, number 248, I draw your attention to that. That is a captive insurance company. That is not a domestic insurance company, so that's not what it is we're talking about. They provide a different product. And then Century Insurance, there's no QC number. And Century Insurance, if you go across, it has an expiration date of July 26, 2030. So you have a variety of expiration dates, two of them that are currently under review, one that expires this year, October 1st, one next year, April 16th, one in January 10th, 2021, and then the Century Insurance one again at July 26, 2030.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Senator Sanaksi, now you're recognized.
I'm not too sure, Mr. Chairman, who would be able to answer that, if it's Mr. Carlson or is it Mr. Camacho. If the QC was not available to any of these insurance that are going to expire, how much revenue would we generate?
I think I answered that question earlier, Senator. On the BPT abatements for the insurance companies, we're looking at $8 to $10 million annually. You're looking at those two companies that are up for renewal. I don't have those numbers. That's what you're looking at.
That's correct. When you identify 8 to 10 on all the insurance, if there is no QC, is that what you're saying? Or you're talking about just the one that are up?
You're talking about the insurance companies, right?
That's correct.
On the BPT, you're talking about BPT abatements.
Well,
is that?
Well, Mr. Camacho, if I look at the QC,
okay,
it talks about corporate tax rebate, real property tax abatement, we're talking about dividend tax rebate, we're talking about GRT abatement, all the sections when it's applicable to the insurance. If they didn't have the QC, how much revenue is generated? That's the question, because we need to know the whole picture, because you can't have just one section.
If that's the portion that I'm talking about, is only for the BPT abatements for those QC holders that are afforded to not pay the BPT on the insurance. That's the 8 to 10 million. I think if you're looking at the income tax side and the overall side, I think it's almost the same amount. You're looking at, depending on the company, reporting on their income tax return. If it's an income tax that you're looking at, it can range from, again, another maybe 8 to 10 million again on income tax alone. It varies because it all depends on what the corporation reports on the income tax, and it all depends on whether it's 100% rebate amount on income tax or a 75% rebate on income tax. So we can go back and look at the income tax side, but it varies. Some are 75 and some are 100% income tax rebated.
Senator San Agustin, does that answer your question?
No, because I need to know the dollar amount. If I don't know the dollar amount, then I don't know what revenue the government can get from it. Thank you.
Mr. Camacho, are you able to acquire that information for the body?
That one, I need to basically go back and run those reports, but through history, when I look at the reporting on the BPT abatements, that's the number that I always see, 8 to 10 million annually, that were for those companies that were issued or afforded the abatement of the BPT on the insurance for those insurance companies. For the income tax side, I always also see numbers that ranges from 8 to 10 million again, and depending on what year you're asking, I have to go back and look at those years, because they some years are are 8, some years are 9. We just have to go back and look at all those companies that are on the QC and look at the years.
Thank you, Mr. Camacho. Senator San Agustin?
And at the same time, Mr. Camacho, when you do go back, make sure, I would hope that you would factor the new tax law, because when their corporate tax rebate, the 35 to 21, you need to factor that in so that we know what revenue could be generated if they didn't have that QC on the corporate tax.
That is correct, but on the QC, whatever they report if they report taxes based on 20% rate, right, then that's the amount that will be rebated. So I think we've gone through the numbers on the corporate side that we were looking at roughly $40 million increase on the corporate side. I mean, that's something that we talk about. So if those QC holders report their income, there's so many of them, then they're going to be reporting lower than before. So that will be the impact. I just have to look at those QC holders and what they report and then report back.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Camacho and Senator San Agustin. Vice Speaker Talai, you had your hands raised? Or was your concern addressed?
Only to ask if he was able to get that information.
Okay, what's the pleasure of the body? There's been a request for additional information. Yes, Senator Rodriguez?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, again, I just want to request from the body if we can just come back to why we're here. I know that we want more information, and I think the information we have now before us indicates that there is revenue that we would be realizing if this amendment is passed. I think the question out there is how many more million are we going to realize? And I would respectfully request our body to move on this amendment so that at least we know what the next course of action for us to take is. So at this time, Mr. Chair, I call for the previous question.
There's been a call for the previous question. Senator San Agustin, you're recognized on the call for the previous question.
You're referring to, are we going to go to a vote?
We are going to go for a vote.
Well, I'd like to ask the body that I be recused because I do have an immediate family affiliated with the banking industry.
Okay, colleagues. Shall the senator has requested that he be recused specifically for the reasons stated.
Point of order, Mr. Excuse me, point of information,
yes, Senator
Mr. Chair.
Espadon,
I also was going to raise the same issue. I had divulged in a previous bill, the trans bill, that our family also had an interest, not in a bank, but in a small financing institution. So I would also offer it to the body for the consideration whether or not both Senator San Agustin and I should vote or not.
We will entertain individual requests. Senator San Agustin's request to be recused. Fellow colleagues, shall the senator, for the reasons assigned by the member, be excused from voting on the amendment proffered by Senator Rodriguez? Any objections? Recognizing there's no objections, Senator San Agustin, your request has been granted. On the request for recusal by Senator Espadon, for the reasons he has stated, shall the senator, for the reasons stated, be excused from voting on the proposed amendment? Any objections? No objections, so ordered. Senator San Agustin and Senator Espadon, you're both excused from voting on the proposed amendment. On the proposed amendment.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Esteves.
So, point of order. I think it's. I have concerns with members of this body speaking to certain measures if there's an intention to recuse. I'd like to request that in the future, if there's a potential conflict that may affect a vote, that they refrain from speaking on a measure that they intend to recuse themselves from voting. I think regardless of the conflict and whether or not they actually vote on the measure, lines of questioning can lead towards other questions and other determinations of this body. So it is my belief that if there isn't an intention to vote on it, or if there's going to be a request to be recused from the voting on the matter, then that should be done prior to discussion of the matter.
Thank you very much, Senator Esteves. Colleagues, I hope you heard the senator's concerns. On the previous question on Senator Rodriguez's amendment to delete sections 1, 2, and 3 and replace it with the proposed amendment, and that the legal counsel be given the opportunity to be able to make appropriate corrections or adjustments with subsequent sections that may make reference to the business privilege tax. On the amendment, all those, there's been expression of objection. All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by raising your hands. Amendment fails. We are still on the original legislation, bill number 16-S. Any further discussion on the proposed legislation? Senator Rodriguez still has the floor, and then Senator Tom Adams.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I want to ask staff if they can pass out my amendment. I think they should have.
While your amendment is being passed out, Senator Rodriguez, you're recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, or if I may just ask for a brief recess so they can circulate it so everyone can see what the amendment is.
3-minute recess.
Can we recess for lunch?
The committee in the whole is now back in session while we are digesting literally the proposed amendments that has been circulated. There's been a request to recess until 2:30. So this committee in the whole is hereby recessed until 2:30 this afternoon.